In the performance of modern orchestral works, some consider this to be the most important instrument of all, the conductor's baton. There was a time, however, when conductors used a larger instrument to command the respect of musicians. In French, the word baton also means this, what we would call a staff or a cane. And it was with a baton like this that a certain Monsieur Jean-Baptiste Lully established a reputation as one of the leading composers and conductors of 17th century France. He would stand on the stage, signal the musicians to prepare, and beat out a tempo by pounding the baton on the floor. It was a style much in favor in those times, but Monsieur Lully took his performance to an unfortunate extreme. In the passion of conducting one of his own works, he hit his toe instead of the floor. He ignored the pain and continued the performance, but the consequences were fatal. His smashed toe became infected. Physicians advised that it be surgically removed. Monsieur Lully refused to submit to the operation, a tragic decision. Gangrene set in, and in less than 3 months' time, Monsieur Lully was dead, the victim of a too vigorous downbeat. And that's one reason, perhaps, why conductors since that time have chosen to forgo this formidable symbol of their position in favor of this one. The modern baton may be less impressive, but it is also much less hazardous to the health. Believe it or not.
Digital doomsday is approaching. Are you ready for the millennium?
For the amateur pianist, playing a concert work in the privacy and comfort of your home is a pleasant, ego-building experience. But attempting the same performance on a stage before an audience is another matter. The fear of lapse of memory, misplayed notes, or faulty interpretation makes cowards of us all. However, there is one piece, an important work by a major American composer, that anyone can play with confidence and style before the most demanding audience. The piece is entitled 433. It was composed by John Cage and first performed at Woodstock, New York in 1952. The composition is in 3 movements, each clearly marked with the notation tacit. Tacit is an instruction to the musician not to play his instrument. In other words, Mr. Cage wished the pianist to remain silent during the whole performance, which lasted 4 minutes and 33 seconds. Now, there was a method behind Mr. Cage's seeming madness. He wanted to demonstrate that the sounds of the environment around us have a value no less than that of composed music. He often said that the music he preferred, even to his own or anyone else's, is what we're hearing if we're just quiet. So, if you'd like to have an idea of what a performance of 433 is like, listen carefully. Realizing that many musicians, other than pianists, might want to play this piece, in a footnote to the music, Mr. Cage informs us that the work may be performed on any instrument, or a combination of instruments. Some artists see themselves as instruments. Instead of playing music or painting, their art is to live for a fixed length of time in some extraordinary way. In a New York studio, artists Linda Montano and Tae-Ching Hsieh are near the end of one such time. They've been connected by an 8-foot length of rope, 24 hours a day, for 1 year.
I, Pauline Olivero, confirm that the seal which I attached to Tae-Ching Hsieh's rope 1 year ago today has not been broken.
Tae-Ching and Linda barely knew each other when they decided to undertake the project. They agreed that during it, there would be no sexual contact between them, no touching of any kind. Living like this is one variation of a creative form called performance art. For Linda and Tae-Ching, the goal was to achieve a fresh perspective on the ordinary details of everyday life. Sheer physical necessity forced them to be alert at all times. Nothing was routine. Everything was transformed by the decision to try to make life into art. Privacy was impossible, and in the course of the year, conflict was inevitable. However, as dedicated artists, Linda and Tae-Ching were determined to see the project through.
In the beginning, we had to talk about how fast, how slow, where to go. And now, after 6 months, we use gestures, and the rhythm is choreographed and internal and unspoken. We each have separate needs and separate places that we'd like to go. And in order to function as two people, we have to 100% agree before we do anything.
To Tae-Ching, who conceived the project, the problems of their strange life together were no different from those which must be overcome in creating any piece of art. To Linda, the problems and the sacrifices were part of the finished work. For both, the ordeal ended precisely 1 year after it began, on the 4th of July, Independence Day. Now, at last, they can touch. For the first time in a year. Linda and Tae-Ching are free to return to their separate, individual lives. In the future, though, there'll be other projects. As his next one-year performance, Tae-Ching announces he will have absolutely nothing to do with art. For him, for an entire 12 months, life will simply be life. At the Edwin Ulrich Museum of Art at Wichita State University, it isn't the paintings that force people to consider the difference between life and art. It's Dwayne Hanson's sculpture, Remarkable pieces like Lady with Cleaning Cart. Creations like Man with Hand Truck are so perfectly made, it seems only their complete stillness distinguishes them from people made of flesh and blood. In his Florida studio, Hansen begins work on another of his realistic sculptures. His work, like that of most artists, involves making countless decisions which blend deliberate thought with indefinable instinct. He's learned from long experience that in order to achieve a natural look, he must carefully pose the model. Once he's chosen a pose, Hansen can begin mixing the plaster he'll use to make a mold of the model. Hansen doesn't try to make a single mold. Instead, he casts 6 separate sections. Later, the sections will be used to shape the plastic and fiberglass that make up the completed sculpture. It takes about 45 minutes for each section to dry.
Oh, that's going to stick to the rest. It might come loose, but that's all right.
Okay. There we go. Man, I know what the man in the iron mask feels like.
The transformation of life into art has begun. Most of Hansen's models believe this represents their one chance at immortality, even though they know he doesn't intend to make exact duplicates of them.
Very good. Come on, over. Yeah.
Hansen will put his feelings into the finished, painted sculpture with subtle changes of color, setting, and other details. Finding the right clothes and accessories can take weeks. A mix of real and artificial hair has to be inserted strand by strand. Hansen has incorporated himself into an intriguing work called Self-Portrait with Model. With its elaborate recreation of a moment from life, it has the power to draw even children into a world where the commonplace becomes art.
Abstract artist Nicky Jusanfort transforms objects into works of art by firing a shotgun at them. Believe it or not.
Welcome to...
When this World War I Sopwith was one of the hottest planes ever to take off into the wild blue yonder, pilots flew more by the seat of their pants than they did with instruments. In fact, back then, there were very few instruments, sometimes none. But then, as now, there was a basic concern for safety and rules to govern what pilots could and could not do. This is a copy of the regulations issued by the United States government in 1920. Every pilot was supposed to read them, even memorize them. Rule number 1 was of paramount importance. Don't take the machine into the air unless you are satisfied it will fly. Basic, but vital. Another, number 6, could save a pilot's life. Pilots should carry hankies in a handy position to wipe off goggles. This one could also be a lifesaver. If you see another machine near you, get out of the way. Those kind of rules were needed then, when aviation was in its infancy. And every flight was an adventure. In those days, commercial aviation virtually did not exist. For barnstorming pilots, the sky was a playground. After a decade of spectacular stunts, aviation got down to business. In 1929, the first coast-to-coast passenger service began with a train ride from New York City to Columbus, Ohio. From there, travelers were escorted from the train and ushered aboard a Ford tri-motor. It was by far the most advanced and luxurious passenger plane built in the United States. The planes flew only during daylight hours, and all passengers received first-class treatment. Intermediate stops included Indianapolis, St. Louis, Kansas City, and Wichita. But passengers were still a long way from California. After being refueled, the plane would deposit them next in the small town of Waynoka, Oklahoma. From there, they had to take a short bus ride to catch another train bound for Clovis, New Mexico, and the final area leg of their journey. At the time, the trip was sensational. It took only 48 hours. Today, a coast-to-coast flight can take less than 5 hours. And at airports around the world, a plane lands or takes off every second of every minute. Despite the headlines that aircraft accidents create, air travel is one of the safest forms of transportation. To direct the flow of traffic through the crowded skies, controllers like these monitor almost 5 million flights each year in the United States alone. The safe departure and arrival of every flight is controlled by the instruments they command. To manufacturers, passenger safety is a paramount concern. Every aircraft, in this case the world's only amphibious helicopter, is put through a series of tests to make sure it meets its design specifications. This test is simple, a simulation of steady rain to determine if all the compartments are watertight. Further tests include flights under actual conditions. Ultimately, the helicopter will be used to carry workmen to offshore oil rigs. In an emergency, it must be able to land or take off from water. Some tests require unusual ingredients. A frozen bird is a vital element in this particular research. Once loaded into what looks like a cannon, scientists use it to duplicate the effect of a high-velocity, mid-air collision between a bird and a jet engine. The force of impact is tremendous, but the engine passes the test. To assure the stability of a new aircraft design, a special piece of equipment is installed on the wingtip of a passenger plane. In flight, it is used to test the ability of the aircraft and its crew to withstand extreme vibration. The artificial turbulence generated by the device is greater than any that might be normally encountered in ordinary flight. By passing a series of such tests, the plane can be certified as safe for commercial passengers. The structural design of modern aircraft makes them efficient machines that also protect those who ride on them. A full-scale controlled explosion demonstrates the cushioning effect. The test indicates that such a crash could be survivable. For passengers, represented here by electronically monitored dummies, simple seat belts are, perhaps, one of the only safety devices they will ever have to use. In this test, however, an elaborate harness is used to demonstrate a simple fact of survival. A sled simulates the impact. The human body can withstand up to 35 times the force of gravity, belted in and riding backwards instead of the other way around. In a mock-up simulating a crash situation, researchers demonstrate the importance of evacuation techniques.
Okay, if everyone's ready now, when we get inside the simulator here, you will be wearing smoke goggles. Linda will pass the goggles out to you from the edge of the building here.
The goggles will obscure vision, duplicating the effect of smoke.
I'd like you to now put your goggles on. A warning bell will sound to start the test.
Unfasten your seatbelts and come this way as fast as you can.
Experts are convinced that passengers have only 90 seconds to escape before fuel tanks explode to create an inferno. Passengers must know exactly where the exits are. They must also instantly follow the instructions of trained flight attendants. Only then will they be able to slide to safety. As a joint venture of NASA and the Federal Aviation Administration, one of the most elaborate and expensive safety tests in history was put into motion in 1984. In manpower and equipment, the experiment cost over $11 million. Researchers were convinced that by staging and photographing a controlled crash, they would learn how to prevent future disasters. Dummies, representing typical passengers, including small children, were wired with electronic sensors and belted into place. Recorded by high-speed cameras and tracked continuously during flight by radar, the test crash was planned to begin here, just beyond the landing approach towers, where special obstacles would rip open the wings. A Boeing 720 would be sacrificed as technicians monitored over 300 electronic devices installed on board. To fly the plane, the pilot stayed on the ground, in command by remote control. In the beginning, everything proceeded exactly as planned. The flight was designed to test two things: crash protection for passengers and crew, and a fuel additive formulated to prevent explosions. To succeed on both counts, the pilot had to direct the plane so that it would hit the special obstacles at just the right angle and speed. In the final seconds, the plan went awry. Cameras mounted on the tail record the deviation from the plan, while cameras inside chronicle the effectiveness of new seatbelt designs. Although the crash did not go exactly as planned, it did provide some evidence that passengers would have been protected by the new fuel additive. The flames of the initial explosion were extinguished within 9 seconds. A second fire may have entered cargo compartments through a forward door forced open by the impact. In the aftermath of the crash, researchers sorted through the burned-out remains. What they discovered justified their effort. The plane had remained intact, with all 6 exit doors operational, if not equally usable. Despite the fire, some passengers could have escaped through the left forward and right rear doors. Although it failed as a controlled accident, the test succeeded in many ways. New, fire-resistant material for passenger seats, for example, lived up to its promise. If such a crash had occurred in reality, it would have been a major disaster. Yet safety statistics provide an astounding comparison. For every 1 aircraft-related fatality, 44 people die in highway accidents. To test toilets, a New Jersey company installed 60 in an 11-story tower and flushed them all at once. Believe it or not.
On Mondays,
There are times each day when all of these stainless steel tables are in use simultaneously. A body laid out on each one, a medical examiner concentrating on the effort to find an answer to a simple question. Was death the result of natural or unnatural causes? This is one of the autopsy rooms of the Los Angeles County Coroner. During the course of an average year, forensic pathologists examined the remains of over 7,000 individuals. The scales are used to weigh vital organs, to determine if any abnormalities exist. Trays like this are used to collect body fluids, including the contents of the stomach. Blood, taken from the victim, also provides important clues. Once it has been transformed into an extract like this, it can be analyzed by this computerized instrument, simply by injecting it directly into the device. The identity of over 30,000 chemical compounds are stored in the computer's memory. If any of these compounds are present in the victim's blood, the computer will find a match and print out the results. To an expert, this graph is the portrait of a killer. PCP, angel dust. For the specialists who work here, such tools and techniques are routine. Sometimes, however, the bodies they must examine are far from ordinary. Case in point was recently unearthed in England. Among the bodies scheduled for routine autopsies in a London morgue was one which had suffered a violent and mysterious death. It was the body in the box. The body had been found buried deep in a marshy bog. To avoid disturbing any evidence, it was removed still encased in surrounding dirt and peat. One small fragment was taken from the body because the investigators wanted to find out how old the corpse was. The carbon-14 test would determine its age. They revealed the man had lived about 2,500 years ago. X-rays guided the delicate next step, removing the fragile corpse from the block of peat. Any prehistoric skeleton is valuable. However, these experts, led by Dr. Ian Stead of the British Museum, suspected they had something that was particularly rare. Because the bog might have preserved more than just the bones, they hoped the flesh had also survived. A shoulder and then an arm confirmed their hope. The bones had softened and were partially disintegrated, but the flesh, tanned like leather, was intact. Clearing the bog man's face revealed that a red mustache and beard framed his lips. the anonymous corpse was beginning to assume a personal identity. The weight of the bog had distorted his head, but with study, the features became clear and a recognizable human face emerged. When the bog man died, he was about 30 years old. Because the bog man's body was so well preserved, there was a chance his internal organs had also survived. If so, they might offer clues as to how he died.
Well, I think that's the stomach, almost certainly. There, and it's got some solids. And I suspect this is more of small intestine coming on round here.
Microscopic examination found minute, intriguing details. The bog man's last meal had been bread, and the burned edges suggested it had been baked in too hot an oven. The presence of small eggs revealed the bog man suffered from intestinal parasites, but they did not kill him. The investigation continued. As they scraped away more dirt and peat, the researchers were finally rewarded with a dramatic, grisly detail, evidence perhaps of murder. Tied around the bog man's neck, they found the remains of a cord and a knot. To Geoffrey Budworth, honorary secretary of the International Guild of Knot Tiers, it was soon clear exactly how the rope had been used to kill.
Could be just a method of you securing two ends together, then it's obviously had some sort of stick in there to twist it up and make a tourniquet.
Strangulation wasn't the only lethal assault. There was also a head wound. Studying it, Dr. Burke realized part of the brain might be intact. To get a closer look, he slipped a fiber optic tube through the wound to function as a small, flexible periscope. As it was pushed through the skull, it discovered little at first. Then, the researchers saw what may have been foreign matter, a possible clue. Dr. Ian West specializes in evaluating medical data as criminal evidence.
This is under the wound in the top of the head, isn't it?
Going right
fragment
through,
actually
yes.
driven in.
Yes.
Which again confirms a narrow striking object, probably something like a small axe. And from the looks of that wound, driven in twice.
Fascinating.
Dr. West was now able to reconstruct the bog man's last agonizing moments. He had not died easily or quickly.
I'm looking at a wound on the undersurface of the neck, well, in fact, on the right side of the neck. It's almost exactly 2 inches long. And when one looks at the depths of it, well, it looks like a cutting wound rather than something which has been produced after death. He's been hit over the head, rendered unconscious, unable to struggle, fight back, tied the garrote around his neck, put a stick through the back of it, twisted, broken his neck. And of course there's this other wound on under the right side of the jaw. Appears to be a cutthroat wound.
The exact and multiple causes of death had finally been established, with evidence that was 2,500 years old. In England during the late 1500s, women who adorned themselves with wigs and makeup were subject to punishment as witches. Believe it or not.
This Sci-Fi Channel program is brought to you by Snickers. Not going anywhere for a while? Grab a Snickers. Hungry? Why wait?
Hey, that's great. But who are the chefs? Not going anywhere for a while?
Great googly moogly.
Grab a Snickers.
You spell it. Yeah.
Welcome to Psychic Talk USA.
Have you given any ideas to going into business for yourself?
Yes, how did you know that? Yes.
She's a psychic!
Is there someone from your past that you're still thinking about?
Yes, someone in the past. I'm shocked. No, really, because I didn't think you guys could see all that.
They saw Honey deep into your closet.
He's dependable. He's all those things all those other guys you had weren't. Go get him. This would be a good one for you.
This is great. I'm so glad that I called. I feel so much better.
We're going to give each and every one of you who calls this number 10 whole minutes of one of the best psychics anywhere. This one's free, folks. So write this number down and just do it. Does she have children?
One daughter.
A gorgeous little girl.
Now, is she modeling or you? Because I keep feeling there's a model in.
Oh, you are so good.
Call in now. You won't be put on hold or get a busy signal. Everyone will get to talk to their psychic for a full 10 minutes. This one's free, so don't miss it. Dial right now.
Call 1-800-817 for free.
We all expect our facial cleanser to clean, but what if it could start reducing the signs of aging the minute you use it? Clinical tests prove a new breakthrough cleanser can actually do this. It combines beta-hydroxy with cleansing microbeads and hydrating moisture. It's proven to help smooth the signs of aging, revealing fresher, newer skin immediately. And the name, Oil of Olay New Daily Renewal Cleanser, proven to help smooth the signs of aging.
To most people,
there's more to this peaceful farm near Philadelphia than meets the eye. As a matter of fact, it's not a farm at all. It's a hospital. Part of the New Bolton Center at the University of Pennsylvania's School of Veterinary Medicine.
Bucky's one of the patients here. He's undergoing an electrocardiogram. He's all right now, but at one time, Bucky's heart almost gave out on him. So he was fitted with a pacemaker like this. It's implanted right here in his neck. And as a result, Bucky has quite a few good years left as a competition jumper. Giving horses and other large animals a new lease on life happens every day in this hospital. There was a time when a broken leg meant that a horse's life was over, but not now. These are the sort of stainless steel plates and screws that doctors now use routinely to put a horse back on its feet. To get an idea of how these devices are used, the hospital has assembled a series of x-rays that document a course of treatment. A 4-year-old stallion broke his leg, and a complex fracture resulted involving hundreds of pieces of bone. Plates were applied with a bone graft, and over a period of time, the fracture healed. The plates were removed, and today, the stallion is used for breeding purposes. For veterinarians, work like this is more than a job. It's a reflection of the concern people have for animals.
When this race began, the favorite was Boytron. He won, but it was the last race he would ever run. Weeks later, an injury to Boytron's right rear leg became infected. For his owners, there were only two choices: destruction or amputation. The operation took place at Washington State University. It was an emotional experience for Dr. Barry Grant.
When they had done the lower amputation, he was on the table a long time, and he ended up with a paralyzed front leg as well as being very short on a right hind leg as well. And we spent 24 hours with him lying down, and he'd try to get up, but he couldn't stand on his front leg, and he would thrash around and sweat me to give him fluids, and we were about to the point of, quitting on him. And, came back in the morning, and he'd stand up eating. He won, there's no way he wanted to be put down.
An artificial leg permitted Boytron to get back on his feet. It was experimental, one of the first times a horse had been fitted with such a device. By adapting to it so quickly, however, Boytron inspired further experimentation by the team of doctors and technicians. In his Washington State University shop, instrument maker Gary Held designed and assembled a custom-made leg. To fit the device on Boytron, a sock is first pulled over the stump. Although he's a high-spirited thoroughbred, Boytron waits quietly while his handlers go through the routine of putting the artificial leg in place. Once the straps have been tightened, his handlers are confident that Boytron will be able to move freely without fear of losing his newfound mobility.
Outside. Hey, welcome off.
Boytron's acceptance of the artificial leg is testimony both to his courage and the engineering of the leg itself. At the Rio Vista Stud Farm in Northern California, Boytron has fathered a new generation of racing thoroughbreds. Since losing his leg, Boytron's value has not decreased. As a sire, he's valued at close to $1 million. Boytron is proof that in the partnership between man and animal, there's no limit to what can be achieved with ingenuity. In Shandong province of northern China, another ingenious partnership has evolved to protect forests like this from the ravenous appetites of insects like these. They're pine moth caterpillars. For them, the succulent needles are a primary food. Unless they're stopped, the hungry caterpillars are capable of devouring and destroying huge tracts of timber and leaving a wasteland in their wake. In the summer, when the caterpillars undergo the metamorphosis that transforms them into fluttering moths, they're particularly susceptible to counterattack. The living weapons used to combat the moths receive their basic training here. Inside this aviary, a specialist called Yun Niao trains them for a unique mission. The birds are magpies, and by training them to equate the sound of the whistle with the satisfaction of their appetites, he can muster an army of feathered allies to follow him wherever he goes. On the day of the planned attack, the Yu Niao leads his army through the forest. The whistle and the empty bowl in his hand are enough to convince the magpies that they're on their way to a feast. The birds break off contact. Soon, however, they'll return, as man and magpie join forces to maintain the balance of nature.
For commuters in New York City, getting to and from work is a daily chore, but not for everyone. There are some individuals to whom creature comforts are important, so they travel in style. When this South American gentleman arrives for work, even blasé New Yorkers stop to take a look. Llamas are normally beasts of burden, But not Chicky. He's a star. With his owner, Martin Munoz, he's generally found near Central Park, where he poses for portraits, with anyone willing to pay his partner a small fee of $5. For Martin Munoz, business is good, as long as Chicky keeps turning heads. At day's end, Chicky beds down here, but only in the winter.
Have a good night.
He and his partner earn enough to spend their summers in the country. Believe it or not.
Weekend of Wonder begins tonight with 4 hours of spine-tingling tales. First, a headless ghost rider revs up for the kill on Kolchak the Night Stalker. Then, an innocent carnival attraction becomes a labyrinth of terror in Toby Hooper's The Funhouse. And the forces of heaven and hell wage war on Friday the 13th, the series. Prepare for the scares. Enter the dimension of darkness, beginning at 7 p.m. Eastern. Now, stay tuned for mysteries, magic, and miracles. Sci-Fi Channel next.